Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. My name is Andy Allison. I'm the offensive coordinator here at Kenyon College. Also a board member for Athletes of Color. And so what we're doing here tonight is going to be a really candid, discussion from some of our minority athletes, minority varsity athletes on campus that are going to talk to you guys about their experiences at Kenyon, what they've gone through, why they chose to come here, and just a really great, honest, authentic, discussion about what it's like to be a current student athlete at Kenyon in today's world. So what I'm going to do is, introduce our panel. They will, talk about themselves, and then we'll dive into the questions. So up first, I would like to introduce my co-host and co-panelist, actually, Felicia Hamilton.
Hi, I'm Felicia Hamilton. I play field hockey at Kenyon. I'm a junior. I'm majoring in American Studies. I am also a part of Black Student Union, Sisterhood, Social Board, and I'm missing one, but it's okay. And something that I think I would like the audience to know about me is that I am currently in the process of starting my own organization on campus for student athletes of color called Minority Athletes at Kenyon, aka MAC. So, yep, that's me.
All right, thank you, Felicia. Up next, we have Maya Fair.
Hi, I'm Maya. I'm a junior lacrosse player from Denver. Also an American Studies major. Some extracurriculars. Besides lacrosse, I'm part of Theta Delta Phi, and similarly to what Felicia just said, hopefully MAC soon. And then one thing that a lot of people don't know about me is that I'm adopted from Guatemala.
Great, thank you, Maya. Up next, guys, we have Racine Ross.
Hi, everyone. My name is Racine, and I am currently on the swim team at Kenyon. I'm a junior, psychology major. I am also the co-president of the SOCA Club, also a member of BSU and a K-STEM mentor. And one fun fact, I guess, is I'm a very big baker, and I'm also the only woman of color on the swim team right now.
All right, great. That's awesome. Up next, we have Maya Sapsford.
Hi, my name is Maya Sapsford. I'm a sophomore. My family currently lives in Washington, D.C. I am a member of the volleyball team as well as Theta Delta Phi. I am intending on being an international studies major with a studio art minor, but we'll see. I change my mind a lot, so I'm not certain on that. Something I want the audience to know is that my mother's Japanese and my father is American, and I lived in Tokyo, Japan for 11 years before moving to DC for high school.
All right, thank you, Maya. Up next, we have Zion Snardon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zion. I'm a sophomore. I plan on majoring in biochemistry, and I'm on the men's lacrosse team. Something I want everyone to know about me is that I have a passion for animals.
Great, thanks, Zion. Up next, we have Kendall Powell.
Hey guys, I'm Kenny Powell. I'm a senior on the track and field team. I'm an econ major from Simsbury, Connecticut. Away from sports, I'm co-president of the finance club. And a fun fact, both of my parents were born in Jamaica.
Great, thanks, Kenny. And last but certainly not least, we have Mamadou Fofana.
Hey guys, my name is Mamadou, senior American Studies major. I played football for 3 years, and I'm part of the social board in Delta Tau Delta.
All right, great. So those are our panelists for tonight. So we will obviously dive right into the questions now. So to kind of let the audience know how this is going to go. Is it's going to be less of a question and answer and more of a roundtable discussion. So what we're going to do is ask the panelists a question about being a minority here at Kenyon, and they're going to be able to openly talk freely, amongst themselves in a real discussion format about each of the questions. So also, if anybody in the audience has questions, please send those via chat to the host at Send Questions, and we'll make sure we get those answered as well. So up first question for the panel. Could you all talk about a critical moment of awareness of being an athlete of color in your sport? Let's start with my fair.
Okay. I think for me, I kind of knew coming into Kenyon, sorry, it kind of goes into question 2. But it wasn't something that I really thought about until I started ironically taking a bunch of classes here at Kenyon. And then I kind of realized oh my gosh, none of our athletic teams are very diverse. What can we do about this? Hence why I'm studying American Studies. But definitely was kind of sad for me just because I feel like we could do a lot better. So it's great that we're having these conversations and panels. And also Felicia, I've talked to Felicia about this 500 times about how you go out onto the field and you only see certain people of color and how most teams are white. And especially for lacrosse, it's more of a white sport. And it involves you have to kind of have a lot of money to start and get into club and even get to Kenyon. So just kind of acknowledging that and acknowledging the privilege I even have of being here, but also kind of going back to my roots of how can I help? So yeah.
I guess I can go next. I think that the first time I noticed that things were a little different was right outside of middle school. I was going to a lacrosse tournament, and I was in Indianapolis, and everywhere I went, I was always the only Black person there. And I'm from Louisville, and I live right in the middle of downtown. I'm constantly surrounded by a lot of people that don't look like me, but also a lot of people that do look like me. And so it's just a really big shock to see that there was no one that had even remotely the same experience as I did out in the field or anywhere that I looked around. But when it came time to pick schools and come to Kenyon, when I did my overnight and I met with the coach, after I saw the team, everything, I think what really sold me was that when I came here, they didn't make me feel like it was going to be a big problem that I was different.
Yeah, go ahead, Maya.
So I wouldn't say that this is the first moment of awareness, but I have to say the Kenyon volleyball team is one of the least diverse volleyball team I've been a part of. And it has never been a problem for me per se, but I did have a moment over the past summer. Some of the leaders on my team were decided that in light of the tragic events and the rise of the racial justice movement that we should have a discussion about race as a team. And I'm currently one of the only POCs on my team, and one of the upperclassmen asked me to spearhead the discussion. And I felt pretty uncomfortable with that. For one, I'm not African American, I'm Asian American, and I do not have the same experiences as African Americans in this country. So I just didn't feel comfortable leading the discussion. And I also had to have a pretty difficult conversation explaining to my teammate that it's not the responsibility of people of color to educate the public about issues of race. And I know that she meant well and she didn't mean to offend anyone or make anyone uncomfortable, but I have to say that was just one of the first times I really felt kind of an other because of my race on my team.
Going back to the point Maya just made, I came from a high school in the inner city of Columbus, and for me, I think it was my first year. It was a racial incident around the football team, and it was just kind of seeing that the coaches kind of relied on the Black players on the team to educate everybody on our team and the coaching staff. And I think like by doing that, like you're not holding people accountable, and they're kind of feeling like it's on the POCs to like educate everybody, which can kind of be a burden sometimes.
For me, it wasn't my first time like realizing my race in the sport of field hockey. Wasn't at Kenyon, but I think at Kenyon, it was my most critical moment. And I was in my sociology class my sophomore year, because I'm a junior now, yeah. And we were talking about representation in the classroom, and that was actually one of my classes at Kenyon where I was not a minority in the room, and there were many people of color in my room. It was my race and ethnicity class. And I was sharing a story about how when I walk out on the field, I count the number of Black girls on the other team, and I literally put myself in their shoes and imagine their playing time and their relationship with their other teammates. And in that class, while I was explaining that, it started to dawn on me that this is an experience that I have that not many other people in the class, because there are only a few athletes in the class, but just in general and on my team especially, could relate to. And so that was a critical moment for me, because I realized, like, as much fun and as accepted I do feel on this team, there are still moments where I feel very alone and isolated.
How about you, Racine? You're kind of quiet over there.
Yeah, well, I think I kind of had the same experience as Zion in the fact that I noticed that I was kind of an outsider, I guess you could say, around when I started swimming. And we would go to like our championship meets and I kind of look around and not see a lot of people who looked like me. I think swimming is not as predominantly white as other sports, but it's definitely a heavy presence. And yeah, luckily I've been able to find like diverse groups of people within certain teams that I've been a part of. Yeah, it's kind of been going on for a little while now.
So, Racine, answer me this, like football, we understand we're the largest team on campus, but swimming and diving is obviously pretty large too. So is there a responsibility that, you guys have talked about, or your coaches have talked about to help increase the diversity on campus, or to, highlight your minority players at all, or swimmers, I guess you would call them?
Yeah, we actually, I know Coach Fernando plays a big part in this. We try to bring as many people of color onto the team, and also trying to expand on the amount of countries that we have represented on our team. And I don't know if you've noticed, but on the pool deck, there's actually a corner with just all of the flags that we have represented from our team. So we definitely do a lot in terms of trying to make it a more diverse group on campus.
Sure. Yeah. All right, Felicia, question number 2.
Yes, unless Kenny, did you want to share before we
go ahead.
do a new question?
Sure. So I feel like track and field is a sport that's usually pretty well represented with different backgrounds. And last year, going into an invitational meet where there was 10 plus teams represented, I remember just looking around and seeing every team with at least 10 minorities, and our roster alone only had 2. So that was sort of eye-opening, especially considering back home in Connecticut. I'm from suburban Connecticut, and our team was half populated with Black people, and here at Kenyon, our roster to date still only has 3 Black runners, which is kind of surprising.
Thank you all for sharing. So kind of a follow-up question, how did the lack of diversity affect you in making a decision about Kenyon, and what convinced you that you wanted to come to Kenyon?
I can start again.
Go ahead.
So as I mentioned in my intro, I'm adopted from Guatemala. So the fact that I even could go to a school like Kenyon when women in Guatemala like don't even probably know what lacrosse is, don't even have an education, I think for me was something that I was really, really grateful for, and wanted to take that advantage and just, just be thankful for it. Like I think about it all the time. The lack of diversity, I honestly, again, I didn't really notice it until freshman year when I started learning about it and talking to people, taking classes. But I felt so welcomed because being a part of the team, they just are all they don't care, or at least my team, I'm very grateful. They don't we don't like it doesn't matter. Like we're all friends. I feel so blessed to have such great teammates and a good coaches, Coach Wags too. But they honestly are the reason why I'm here as my team and my coaches. They made me feel so welcomed and accepted. So
I can go next. So kind of going off of what Maya said, I really based my decision on how I felt when I visited the campus, kind of what the other students looked like and how the team welcomed me when I got there, and just kind of what they talked to me about when I was there. I didn't want it to make them feel like they were selling the school to me because I've had that experience in the past. And it really felt like as soon as I got there that I was part of the family already. So that was really like the final say, I guess, and how I made my decision.
Does anyone want to add to the question, or we can keep moving on? Yeah, Maya?
Well, I can just kind of answer the question. Before I moved to DC, I went to an American school in Japan, and it is an extremely homogenous school. Everyone is either white, Japanese, or half like me, and I'd never really thought about my race at all until I moved to DC, and I went to a private school in DC that was only 40% white, and there was a huge range of students coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds and also different races, and it was the first time that I actually recognized being Asian as part of my identity, I think, because my entire life, everyone else had looked just like me. And I think it started to become a lot more important to me then, because when I started looking at schools, it was a question I asked a lot. And I loved that about my high school, that it was so diverse and I became friends with people from so many different backgrounds. And I think that was something that turned me off when I first looked at Kenyon, but there are also a lot of alumni from my high school who attended Kenyon, and one of my assistant coaches in high school also played volleyball and track at Kenyon and was an African American woman, and she kind of talked to me a lot about it. And I was also looking at other liberal arts schools that were similar, and she said that although especially after I guess the 2016 election, the numbers of students of color at Kenyon has dropped significantly, that it was more about the environment to her, and she felt for the most part very welcome. And obviously there are going to be bad experiences everywhere, but I think that conversation had a huge deal to do with why I chose Kenyon in the end.
Before we move on, I'll end with, I am actually a walk-on. I don't know if many people know that, but I joined the field hockey family much later than the other recruits, but still before the season started. And I will say that it was actually my teammates that convinced me to play at Kenyon. I was already accepted, but it was meeting the other field hockey girls in my class that encouraged me to actually play field hockey at Kenyon.
I'll add to that. So I was also a walk-on, but to the lacrosse team. So getting here, the lacrosse guys were my first, large group of friends, and the coaches really made me feel welcomed, and I was included in all of the recruit meetings, and I got to, pick a jersey number before I even made the team, which was awesome. And I felt like I was a part of something before I was even officially on the team, which, was great.
For me, my experience was different because when I originally came to Kenyon, I was supposed to play soccer. Ended up joining the football team last summer. I think like being at Kenyon, like being a part of the football team, like we're the most diverse team on campus. I think also like helped me a lot because a lot of the first years, like soccer players who were here, minorities who were on the soccer team my first year, all ended up transferring. And actually got a chance to catch up with one of them this past summer. And he said that the fact that he was one of the only minorities on his team our first year here was played a big role into like him transferring out of Kenyon because like he didn't feel like he connected with his teammates here.
All right, great. If there's nothing else on this topic, we can move to question number 3. So question number 3 is not only a minority at campus, but also in the area that can at times be hostile to people of color. Did that ever have an impact on any of you? If so, how did you deal with that? And just what were your interactions like?
It's kind of a loaded question. I think that my race has always been a factor in anything that I've done, whether it be on campus or outside. It's something that I always have to be cognizant of, not my choice, but because I was taught that way and I was taught the safe way to look like me and still be successful. And I don't know, I feel like it's really hard to convey the experiences of someone else that doesn't look like you because you just genuinely have no clue what they're going through. I was taught at a very young age what I should and should not do and how I should hold myself and how I should hold myself around people that don't look like me, how I should hold myself around white people or Black people. And I think that coming to a place like Kenyon, it was not really a shock to me at first, just because I've been in, I guess, kind of diluted environments for a lot of my life. I've been surrounded by people that don't always look like me, so I was comfortable with it. But I do know people, and I'm friends with people that were having a really hard time with it. And I think that oftentimes it's, even though it's something that is easily seen on the surface, it is really thought about that someone's appearance can play such a big impact on their lives and how they grew up and how they interact with the world around them.
Yeah, definitely, Zion. I think that's a really good point. I think that, you know, someone like you, someone like Kenny, someone like Mamadou, if you got pulled over, right, you have to understand that even the slightest like move and you could not be going home. And how do you make your white teammates understand something like that, right? How do you make your white coaches understand something like that? So I think the more conversations we can have like this is going to open up more room for understanding, more room for, you know, not really empathy, but just more understanding that, hey, even though on paper, you know, these two experiences look similar, you know, you go through an extremely different range of emotions than your white teammate does, right? And so this is the platform that we have to continue to use to educate our, you know, our non-minority teammates and also our minority teammates that are coming after us, right? That's part of the reason why we're doing this, so that they know that at Kenyon, even though it's isolated and a little remote, we have the resources here to help you guys. We've been through it, and because we've been through it, here's how we're going to help you if you have to go through it, right? Not saying that you will, but we made it. We're stronger than ever. So we're going to try and, help you guys out as well. Anyone else have anything to add on this topic?
Mine is a little less serious than that. But not being a Black person of color, and just being Guatemalan, a lot of people don't know what I am or what race I am. So at home, I get a lot of questions, which a lot of people ask me, they go, "Do you get offended if I ask you like what your race is?" And I think that's really interesting because I think it's how it's brought up. I get random people, like I'll be sitting eating dinner and like someone will come up to me and go, "Oh, are you Greek? Are you Indian?" And for me, I find that so offensive, but like if we're having a conversation about it, I think it's okay. But I think for me, that's been the only kind of time at home, at least that I can remember. And I find it kind of ironic because at Kenyon, obviously, I don't really feel that way, but I just please don't do that. If you're gonna ask, just have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say for Racine and me too, as Black women, like our lives are, or I honestly, I'll speak for myself. I feel threatened sometimes going into town. Walmart trips can be scary. I have yet to have a racist encounter, but I know of professors and then other Black athletes who have been asked about their race by children in Mount Vernon who have never seen a Black person before. So it's weird because Kenyon is a very liberal space in the middle of a very red town and area, but I mean, that has an impact, but I don't know how to end this statement, but I just wanted to add that.
Sorry. It's hard. I mean, how like that is again, right, something that your white teammates don't have to think about. They don't have to think about going to Walmart and having it be uncomfortable, or Kroger, or right, Buffalo, like Wild Wings. So it's things like that where you have to actually consider, do I bring somebody with me? Do I only go during the day, right? So it's things like that that are hard for us to have to deal with on a day-by-day basis. But your non-minority teammate, your coaches, that thought might not even cross their mind. So, even if it's just asking us, asking you guys, how are you doing, right? Mm-hmm. That will go a long way. Or hopefully, some of your teammates are on here listening, and the next time they have to go to Kroger or Walmart, be like, "Hey, do you want to come with me?" Right? I'm not saying it'll be easier, but it'll probably be easier, right? So yeah, no, I can definitely agree that it is difficult, right, being at Kenyon in the heart of a very red area in the state. I can't tell you how many red signs I pass on my commute up to work. However, I think that makes this all the more important, because I don't believe that every supporter out there is racist, but the more education we can get out there, the better off, the more comfortable your simple trips into town will be.
Yeah, kind of to add to that, I've lived in huge cities my entire life. I've never lived in a small town, and I think that cities are often a lot more diverse. And I think I've thought about it more this year with the election coming up and just the increased extreme polarization in our country. I was like in Kroger the other day and I'd gone alone for the first time, and I looked around and I was the only person of color in the store, and it was like, for me, like something I'd never thought about before, and it was a little bit of a scary moment. I think now more than ever too, like people will judge you in town for just wearing a mask. But yeah.
That's actually a really interesting point you brought up, Maya. And how has, navigating campus with a smaller population in a small town as a person of color changed during this like COVID environment for those of you who are on campus?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Felicia. I think that the microscope or the lens that was on you guys right before is even right tighter, right, more focused now, with the election coming around and all of the things in Minneapolis and all over with the police, like shooting is just, we can't go into town without somebody having that thought about are we victims or are we just playing that card, right? And so I think that it's getting increasingly harder the deeper we get into 2020, right? And I think that that's a scary thought for parents that are on here with potential recruits that want to come here. I think that's an unnerving thought for your parents, hearing what you guys go through, that maybe that's not something you guys talked about. I don't talk to my parents about it. So how have you guys handled these types of conversations with your parents at all? And were they nervous about sending you guys here? You don't have to put them on the spot, but you kind of do.
I think that initially, my parents were actually super anti-Kenyon. I also come from a pretty bustling city, and places like Kenyon tend not to favor people that look like me. I think I feel pretty safe speaking for both Kenny and Mamadou, saying that at times it can be a little intimidating going into town and not having anyone that looks like you, just with all the stares and the looks and everything, and not knowing what people are thinking. And you can visibly see how people change how they act around you when you get close or when you're even interacting with them. But I definitely think that not only Kenyon, but Gambier needs a closer look, because oftentimes you'll find that the things that you may be thinking in your head are a little bit blown out of proportion. I know that things I might have thought that seemed scary or seemed kind of intimidating at first just weren't that bad as I went and experienced them. And I think that being a Kenyan has definitely opened me up to, I guess, let my guard down a little bit when I'm out and about, and just kind of be me whenever I can.
I think my parents were kind of split. I had one parent who was so ecstatic, was like, you have to go. And then the other parent was kind of similar to Zion, was like, it's not very diverse. I think my mom really wanted me to go to a diverse place, just because I grew up going to predominantly white schools. But I think because of the team and how comfortable I felt, she saw that I really wanted to go. And I think that helped. But it was definitely nerve-wracking, just because obviously I feel like your parents know you really well. So kind of having to listen to both sides was good, because it made me think about it, but also scary as well.
I'll be honest, my parents love Kenyon, and they just think it's the cutest thing. But after I was admitted to Kenyon, I toured at Kenyon one last time with my African American history class in high school, and I actually ended up touring Kenyon in the midst of protests against the use of the N-word on campus. And so that was a very eye-opening experience for me, because before that, I knew that I was going to be a minority on this campus, but I thought it was just a liberal, safe space for me. And touring Kenyon in the midst of this big protest, I saw and read that was not just the case. And so it was actually the response from the students at the time that was comforting in a weird way, to see like the protests happen, and also the recognition they got in the protests. And there has been change. And also there has been, like, students have been able to speak up and protest still. So I think, it was scary, and a little bit like I experienced some doubt seeing that on my tour after I was already admitted to the school, but then seeing the way students responded was like a very empowering feeling to see, or to feel.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So, you don't expect, I think, to get as much probably support as you guys have. So, I don't want to paint this out to be where your white teammates, non-minority teammates, right, don't care, or they're uninformed. It's actually quite the opposite. So I think that's a really good point, where just specifically talking on the football team, there's so many people from so many different areas, right, that come from so many different backgrounds. And so, but with all that being said, they're all aware enough to understand exactly where we're at in 2020 with these racial tensions, with the election is where it is, right? And so I think that you can reassure your parents that you're all in pretty good hands. So anyone else have anything to add on this topic? No. All right, Felicia, I think you have the next question.
I kind of want to combine
go ahead.
two questions. I want to see how this works. But Mamadou touched on this earlier with, student athletes of color leaving because of feeling isolated. And actually, in the year above Mamadou, there were only 2 Black men in the class, and then who ended up transferring. So that class graduated with no Black men. So I'm going to ask, what resources do you feel that you have at Kenyon right now, and how do those resources interact with the role athletics plays in your experience as a minority on campus?
I'll start. So a good resource that I took use of when I got here was ODI. So just going to talk to someone on the staff that has my back, regardless of what the situation is. When I was willing to go to their office to talk about literally anything in my life. And then a more recent resource that I've been making use of. I actually have a Black coach now. And in the summer, when all of the racial injustices were going down, this coach gave me a phone call, and we talked for, a good 10 minutes, and he asked me how I was doing. And it made me feel, much, again, happy about the new coaching, the new coach choice, sorry. And, also reinforced that he had my back and that he was on my side.
For me, it's having people like Dean Kennerly, who's the advisor of Men of Color. I'm currently the president of Men of Color on campus. Or also just like Black faculty members, just like people like Nair or like Frankie Gourier, who people I just schedule office hour meetings with them, even during semesters I don't have their classes, just to talk about what me or some other men of color is going through on campus as far as racial, just kind of get their perspectives on it.
Yeah, I would say that professors are definitely a great resource to have on campus. I also know that my coaches are also very open to talking about basically anything. And so I really do appreciate all the help that they have offered on their end.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, we do have one audience question that I'll get to right now. So, in what ways can non-people of color or non-minorities on the team help first-year incoming minorities feel welcome on teams that generally lack diversity?
So I have some experience with that coming into the lacrosse team freshman year. So this would be, take them in as you do the other recruits. Don't treat them differently because they're the only minority coming in. Make sure that they have a seat at the table and that, they're welcome to all the social events that you guys do as a team. And also encourage the discussion that, if he has something that he needs to talk about, he can feel comfortable bringing it up with the senior captains or whoever.
Yeah, I think being incoming, right? You guys all remember it's not just that you're new on the team. You're right bottom of the right totem pole. You don't know everybody's name. You're not part of any of the cool kids clubs yet. And so on top of that, you're also a minority and you look around and all you see is white. So, what else would have helped you? Is it something that the coaches need to address early on? Is it something that should just, be handled by the teammates? What do you guys think?
I think for me is not being scared, because I personally just get very anxious sometimes to talk to people about certain things, especially like being adopted. Like I don't necessarily tell everyone that. So I think I would just tell myself or incoming freshmen to like not be scared to talk to your teammates or your coaches about it. And I have very welcoming coaches and stuff. It's more just me personally. Like I just get so freaked out. But knowing that they're not gonna judge, like they're here to help you. So that's kind of, I think, just being strong and vulnerable with your teammates and coaches.
Yeah, I'd agree with Maya. Being a walk-on, I was pretty shy. I don't think I spoke a lot, but then the more I spoke, the more comfortable I became with speaking. And I now feel comfortable enough actually to just like speak up when I feel the need to on my team. But I'll add that while we're waiting on resources within athletics, for example, minority athletes at Kenyon to be approved, there are resources like outside of athletics, like Black Student Union, Sisterhood, that I'm a part of, which I go to, which helps a lot. But at the same time, like some of those meetings like Adelante for Latinx students on campus are during practice times. So I agree with what Kenny was saying earlier too, and just that it's up to the team to be there for their player, no matter who they are or what they look like or what their background is. And I also agree with Maya and that don't be, scared to speak up for what needs to be spoken about. If we're closing on that question, I have another question to ask from the audience. It seems like most of the panelists felt immediately welcomed to their individual teams. Has this sentiment changed or faltered at any point while at Kenyon? And I think we might have touched on this. I know Maya Fair was saying how welcomed she has felt and continues to feel at Kenyon and on her lacrosse team. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but for anyone who has, why, if you were a multi-sport athlete, even before college, like if you played multiple sports in high school or if you played multiple sports at Kenyon, what was it that made you decide the specific sport that you're playing now? And was it the environment? Was it just skill? Or was it like Kenyon's environment, etc.?
I think that's an interesting question. Right, Kenyon is unique in and of itself, not just with the high academic, right, our reputation there, but also location, athletics, right, diversity, majors, right, whatever it is, the tuition costs, right. So we're unique that way. So there had to be something about Kenyon that, if it was the teammates, maybe we touch on that. But looking back now, what would you guys tell your 18-year-old selves trying to make this decision now that you know what Kenyon is like? That's a question. That's a good question.
I kind of have two answers to that. So I grew up.
Good. I was going to call on you, Racine. Good.
I grew up in South Florida, which is actually a pretty diverse place. I feel like it's really a melting pot of a bunch of different races and backgrounds. So one of the reasons that I actually chose Kenyon is due to the change of location and scenery, because of course Florida does not have seasons at all, and I feel like I've always just kind of wanted to experience that. Looking at pictures and everything, it just seems like one of the most beautiful things to, I feel like, have experience in life. And the second part, the connections and networks that I've made through Kenyon so far have helped me a lot, because especially like during this whole pandemic thing, through alumni that I've talked to, I've luckily been able to find jobs and internships to still continue to work through. And then talking with coaches, I've been able to, I guess, expand my network in that aspect also in terms of the career path that I choose to take later on.
Mine is very similar to Racine's because I think going into Kenyon, I'm proud of myself because it's hard watching all your friends kind of commit to these crazy schools so early. And you're like, what am I doing? Why haven't I committed yet? What's wrong with me? I think just taking time to make sure that Kenyon was the right place for me. So I'm personally so happy with my pick, and I wouldn't have been happier anywhere else. Knowing that I had a great team, a great coach, and knowing that since it's such a small school, you have access to all those professors. So like we were saying earlier, those are such great resources. I also go to my professors all the time and talk to them about just random things, doesn't even have to be about class, but just really enjoying all that Kenyon has to offer, along with my family lives in Ohio too. So knowing that they would get to watch me play was huge, because living in Colorado, it's not like they could fly, but not very often. So them getting to watch me play was also a huge, huge deal to me, especially because they're getting older. So.
I think on that same note, just another audience question. So obviously we're in the heart of like COVID right now, and having to work in smaller groups. So, how are your teams working on building relationships and making sure that everyone's kind of needs are being met when we can only meet in groups of 10 or less? So has there still been an emphasis on talking about diversity, improving it? Are you guys having to do that a lot via Zoom? How are you guys doing it on your teams?
Field hockey is, well, for starters, instead of having our team meeting, my teammates should be watching this. But in addition to that, we have worked, conversations of equity into our regular program, which I really admire because it's not really isolating it and instead working it into our routine, which is what it needs to be, which is where it needs to be worked in. So, for example, every year we give a presentation on a woman athlete, and this year we decided that that woman athlete would be any woman athlete who used their platform to advocate for social justice. So those are the examples that are coming to the top of my head. But yes, we have changed our routine, and we are also there's a campaign with the NCAA that is taking off for diversity and inclusion that's going on right now. So we're getting involved in as many ways as we can.
All right, so Kendall, I know you mentioned, you've got a new head coach, right? New minority head coach. What has that transition been like for you? Not just getting a new head coach, but new minority head coach, and him having to deal with everything in the midst of COVID. How has that transition been as a minority athlete to now having a minority coach?
So yeah, it's definitely been different. It's my first time having a minority coach in all of sports, which is crazy to think about. And we meet about, every other week, I would say. And while we don't necessarily have these kinds of conversations, they are welcome to be brought up, and both of the coaches have encouraged it. And unfortunately, nothing has been brought up, but on campus, everyone, I feel like me being the only senior is a chance for me to use my platform here to, make sure that all of the first years, they all have different backgrounds, making sure that they feel comfortable being on the team and that they feel like they're valued and that they can, speak up in any kind of setting as a team. And also with having a Black coach, it's another person to talk to, another resource, another person to share, problems in my life or, interesting stuff that we see in the news about racial injustices across other college campuses. So it's been a blessing, and I really don't take it for granted. Coach Hunter has been awesome.
So same question to you, Maya Sapsford. You also have a new minority head coach. So what has that transition been like for you?
I'd say we haven't really had many conversations about race as a team since this summer. I think it's been hard to get everyone together and actually know when we're allowed to meet and stuff like that. But I know that my coach, it's Coach Segura, I think she's here, has been going to a lot of meetings. I think there's a different sorry, I'm blanking. But I know that she's participating in a lot of different groups on campus that have to do with diversity and inclusion, and I'm really excited to have her represent us in that way. I liked my last coach a lot as well, but I think she was like from the Mount Vernon area and had been her entire life. And I think that it was kind of hard for her to understand the experiences of students of color and students from like metropolitan areas and like students living, working in like such a high academic school. So I'm really excited about the new coach.
All right, so we'll thank you, Maya and Kenny. So I'll ask one more question from the audience, and then we'll end with our closing question. So coming into Kenyon during the recruiting process, would it be more comfortable for the recruiting coach to address your diversity and discuss how you can fit in, or to treat you the same as a non-POC athlete and potentially not addressing your concerns?
I think it's better to address it because like if they don't, like especially if you're coming in like on a weekend, for example, like you'll go out and see like the people you'll be teammates with for like the next 4 years. So like by like not talking about it doesn't mean like we're sweeping under the rug because we do see it. Like I have talked to like other athletes of color, like some basketball who come on this campus and like they're asking me like why, like how come we don't have enough for like basketball players on the basketball team here? And like oftentimes they come around NOC or like the black football players because like even within their recruiting visit, they're feeling like they don't have anybody. I think coaches talking about that would be like helpful because like at least like they know what they're going into.
I feel pretty conflicted about this question because I had a coach last year who had me speak only to Asian recruits, and I felt pretty weird about being assigned that role. I would be completely happy to speak to any recruit who reached out to me, but I just feel like having that conversation forced was almost just like awkward and like it kind of offended me. So I think you kind of have to be careful when you're starting the conversation about that. I guess, yeah, I don't know if people feel differently about that, but personally.
No, I definitely agree. I think that it should be addressed at some point. I definitely think that if the student has concerns, that it should be addressed immediately. But to force the conversation on an incoming student or a new student can be pretty rattling sometimes. I think that as long as things are flowing well, then there's no reason that they should feel like they're any different from anyone else. I think that if serious concerns come up, then that conversation absolutely needs to happen. But there's also a way to go about having that conversation, and it's not. I feel like it wouldn't be one that's like probing and questioning, but that just needs to make sure that the student in question is provided with all the resources that they need in order to get through what they're going through, and not to be made to feel like they're a burden or they're different.
Anybody else want to touch on this before we hit our closing question?
Yeah, I kind of want to add on to both what Zion and Maya just stated. I think it's definitely like a case by case basis on whether or not that's one of the first questions that come up. Like I said, for me, I came from a very diverse place. So I feel like coming to Kenyon, I was super open-minded about what to expect. I didn't really like set any expectations for myself. So I wouldn't say I really had like any concerns with diversity coming into Kenyon. So I probably would have preferred not to have a coach say like these are all the resources that you have, but I also would have been open to, I guess, kind of understanding what is available to me. So yeah.
All right, great. We'll wrap this up here, guys, with our closing question. So our closing question is, what would you have liked to have seen during your time at Kenyon in terms of diversity, improvements, resources, and are you seeing that now?
I think it's like these meetings we're having right now, or like going back, like the meetings we've had as a football team this past summer. I thought that was like really important. Like, like start a discussion not only like between the students of color on the football team, but like everybody, because like it's like an issue that like involves all of us, and like we can't like make progress as a community unless like we have everybody in on a discussion.
Yeah, great point, Mamadou. I think that, these are obviously hard topics, hard conversations to have, but I think the hard ones are the necessary conversations that we have to have, because if we, you guys have all heard the saying, right? Like if you don't do anything, you're just enabling it to happen. So if we don't talk about it, if we don't address it, then we're obviously just enabling these conversations to happen. But are the resources right today, are they better than they were for you guys last year? In terms of, outlets you guys have to reach out to. We obviously all know Chris Kennerly, right, and the huge role that he plays right for us in ODEI. The clubs and the support groups. So I definitely, in my short time here, I can say that I've seen improvements in the last year and a half, and I think we have varsity athletes that want to be in charge of that change and really put their best feet forward and help those that are coming after you have the best overall experience that they possibly can. So, what resources would you suggest that, the freshmen that come in after you guys really tap into outside of just talking to their teammates? And we touched on ODEI, how do you approach this conversation with one of your coaches, right? So how honest, right, do you guys have to get?
I would say that the conversations that have been going on have been great, and they should be continued. And like what I was saying earlier, worked into the routine. But I also think there should be a space in athletics and outside of athletics. And maybe this is where ODEI comes in, but just to foster and facilitate these conversations so that, it's great to see students taking charge, but it shouldn't have to always be on the student. And I think, especially within athletics, there should be definitely a council or a room of adults making the decisions to foster equity and inclusion, and that room is well represented, and it's not on the athletes to bring in the ideas and start the change, but just be a part of the change.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to add before we close this? No? Going once? All right. Well, thank you, panelists, for, taking time out of your obviously busy yet not as busy as they should be, right? Schedules right now with COVID going on. Definitely want to thank the alumni office for helping us put this right together for part one of walking in our shoes. And obviously, you know, thank you to the audience, both outside of our Kenyon community, our coaches, our teammates, you know, obviously, you know, my colleagues as well. Everything has to begin with a conversation. And so we can't have this conversation without people listening. So we do, you know, I definitely thank you guys for taking the time, and hope that you guys will all tune in to our alumni panel right this week on Thursday, which myself and Felicia will be help moderating as well. But please, if you guys have any other questions, you know, you can reach out to the alumni engagement office and they'll figure out how to get a hold of us. But yeah, thank you again.